Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, a Dungeons and Dragons canon hardback from very early in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. This came out on November 2015, so it's actually pretty much, yeah, it's 10 years old. It's literally 1 decade old, which is pretty wild. Um, and um, and we're going to talk about it through the mnemonic of Growlsaf, which is my mnemonic for creator, rating, legacy, and then successes and failures, right? And okay, so let's dig in. So who is the creator of the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide? Well, this is pretty shocking. It was Wizards of the Coast, duh, right? Like they of course they make D&D books, right? But here's the surprise. It was also Green Ronin, right? So Green Ronin's around, and this was a collaboration. And yeah, it's really odd that it was a collaboration because, this is the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, right? So, who's the expert on Faerun? Who's the expert on the Forgotten Realms? Who's the expert on one region of the Forgotten Realms, right? Does Wizards of the Coast need help building a guide to just one region of Forgotten Realms? Logically, they would not, but they did. So let's look at why. So basically, this came out in November of 2015, and the reason they needed help was they were coming out of the gate of the new edition of 5th edition. And they had just come out of 4th edition. There was a lot on the line. So we just got the 2024 core rule books, and it was completely different than the transition from 4th to 5th edition. 4th edition almost ended Dungeons and Dragons. It split the community in half. There were a ton of people that really hated it. That's not me. I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of good things about it. I missed some of the things from 4th edition. And actually, 4th edition has kind of aged like a fine wine. I think generally people's opinions of 4th edition has gotten better as the years have gone by. But it was a crisis. It was literally a crisis in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. 4th edition was very bad time for Dungeons and Dragons. So they had to do a ton of work to get 5th edition up and running, and Mike Mearls did that work. And there were some serious bumps in the road, like Monty Cook was on the team and then got out of the team, right, and formed a company, Monty Cook Games, and that split was so significant that it literally created Monty Cook Games, which was, and the Cypher system, was kind of born out of this division where Monty Cook could have been, it could have been Mike Mearls and Monty Cook, just like it was Jeremy Crawford and Christopher Perkins for a long time, but it wasn't. There was division, right? So the birth of 5th edition was very difficult, right? And so what they did was they came out of the gate, and they had spent so much time and so much energy and burned the candle at both ends for so long to build 5th edition, and it worked. They actually fixed the problems of 4th edition, specifically Mike Mearls did. But then basically they came out and they needed help just getting books on the shelves, right? And so that's where Green Ronin came in. Now, what's really interesting is Green Ronin was around back then. They worked literally on Dungeons and Dragons, and they're responsible for the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, which to my knowledge I'm assuming that's still sold today. I think they're still printing all of the D&D 5th edition canon books. I don't think there's any. I'll bet there are some that there's like Acquisitions Incorporated. I would be very surprised if there's enough demand for that to warrant a reprint. But books like Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, I could see, somebody, a new dungeon master might really want that book, right? And so that's a great question. I wonder if we know, actually it wouldn't be too hard. Basically, if you work in Barnes & Noble, I'd love to know, do you receive, 10-year-old books onto the shelf, for Dungeons & Dragons? I would love to know that. If you have a field report, please let me know. But Green Ronin was around back then, and they're around now, right? So the creator of Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, Green Ronin, is still around now. What's really interesting is what they create today. So they created the Dragon Age tabletop role-playing game. They did an excellent job on that. That was a very important video game at the time. I'm not sure if it's really important today. I know like video games have really scaled since then, and there's no shortage of, you know, bog standard medieval European fantasy. You know, I think games like Skyrim and you know, have really an Elder Scroll, and actually I think a lot of the juices on Dark Age, you know, Dark Souls, and what is that one that George R. R. Martin made? I don't think it's Elder Scrolls. It's a different one. But you know, I'm not sure Dragon Age is really that relevant anymore. But at the time, it was, and so you know, Green Ronin made that, right? And today they have this age system, which is AGE capitals. I think it stands for Advanced Gaming Engine, and they have a modern age, a fantasy age, and it's a rule system that they've kind of made into a multiverse, you know, that you could play whatever you like under it, and it, you know, it's almost like a GURPS engine, and it's done okay, right? And I think that's the thing with Green Ronin. They have momentum, but they are not doing great. However, I don't think they're not really burning up the charts, and I don't think they had any games on the top, on Professor Dungeon Master's top 20 most popular tabletop role-playing game list. But one of the things that companies have learned is if you can keep your staff small and you have a back catalog, you could do just fine, right? And I think that's exactly, I think they can scale up and scale down as needed, and I don't think they have a ton of staff, right? And so they're still there, they're still kicking, and creating Sword Coast Adventure Guide really did not make or break them, which I think is fascinating. So I really just discussed the creator of Sword Coast Adventures Guide. I'll get on to the other parts of the mnemonic there in future videos. Thanks for your patience. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.